The Tempest by William Shakespeare. Act 2, Scene 1, lines 71 to 123. In this section, conversation among Alonso, Gonzalo, Antonio, Sebastian, Adrian, and Francisco continues. Please listen to the lines while you follow them in your own textbooks.
Tunis was never graced before with such a paragon to their queen.
Not since Widow Dido's time.
Widow? A pox o' that! How came that widow in? Widow Dido?
What if he had said Widower Enos, too? Good Lord, how you take it!
Widow Dido, say you? You make me study of that. She was of Carthage, not of Tunis.
This Tunis, sir, was Carthage.
Carthage?
I assure you, Carthage.
His word is more than a miraculous harp. He hath raised the wall and houses, too.
What impossible matter will he make easy next?
I think he will carry this island home in his pocket, and give it his son for an apple.
And, sowing the kernels of it in the sea, bring forth more islands.
Die.
Why, in good time.
Sir, we were talking that our garments seem now as fresh as when we were at Tunis at the marriage of your daughter, who is now queen.
And the rarest that e'er came there.
Bait, I beseech you, Widow Dido.
Oh, Widow Dido? Ay, Widow Dido.
Is not, sir, my doublet as fresh as the first day I wore it? I mean, in a sort.
That sort was well fished for.
When I wore it at your daughter's marriage.
You cram these words into mine ears against the stomach of my sense. Would that I had never married my daughter there, for, coming thence, my son is lost, and in my rate she too. Who is so far from Italy removed, I ne'er again shall see her. O thou mine heir of Naples and of Milan, what strange fish hath made his meal on thee?
Sir, he may live. I saw him beat the surges under him, and ride upon their backs he trod the water. Whose enmity he flung aside, and breasted the surge most swoln that met him. His bold head 'bove the contentious waves he kept, and oared himself with his good arms in lusty stroke to the shore that o'er his wave-worn basis bode. As stooping to relieve him, I not doubt he came alive to land.
No, no, he's gone.
Sir, you may thank yourself for this great loss, that would not bless our Europe with your daughter, but rather lose her to an African, where she at least is banished from your eye, who hath cause to whet the grief on it.
Prithee, peace.
Now let us look at the text in detail. In the last class, we left off where Gonzalo still talks about his garments being fresh as when they were worn for Claribel's wedding in Tunisia. So this is where we start. Tunis was never graced before with such a paragon to their queen. He says Tunis was never before had such a perfect queen. And Gonzalo, not since Widow Dido, not since Widow Dido's time, not since Widow Dido. Now who is this Widow Dido? Now when he says Widow Dido, Antonio holds on to the word widow, and he says widow, a pox of that. How came that widow in? Widow Dido, he says. Now just for your information, Widow Dido was the first queen of Carthage in Tunisia. In Virgil's Aeneid, where Dido falls in love with the Trojan hero Aeneas, and she is broken-hearted when he departs from Tunisia or Tunis. So he says, how can she be widow? Because Aeneas just departed from her. How can you call her widow? She's not a widow. And Sebastian comes in rescue of Antonio and says, what if he had said widower Aeneas too? Good Lord, how you take it? He says, next thing you know, he'll be saying widower Aeneas. Good Lord, how can he interpret the story in that way? Widow Dido, said you, and Adrian here, you make me a study of that. She was of Carthage, not of Tunis. Okay? And now Aiden picks up another fault. Carthage and Tunis are not the same thing, he says. And Gonzalo says, this Tunis, sir, was Carthage. They are the same. Tunis was Carthage earlier. And Adrian says, Carthage? I assure you, Carthage. I promise you it was Carthage. Yes, I know, I'm sure. His word is more than the miraculous harp he hath raised the wall and houses too. Now in this part, raising a miraculous harp is an analogy drawn to Amphion harp raised the walls of Thebes. But here Gonzalo's words have rebuilt the walls and the city of Carthage. So what is the meaning of this sentence that is marked in purple? Gonzalo's word is like the legendary harp of Amphion, which when played caused the walls of Thebes to rise. Now Gonzalo, just by saying so, has created a whole new city. Antonio, what impossible matter will he make easy next? What next? What impossible matter will he create next? Just like Amphion through his harp created the city of Thebes. And Sebastian says, I think he will carry this island home in his pocket and give it his son for an apple. He says, I think he will carry this whole island in his pocket and give it to his son as an apple. Insulting words, of course. And sowing the kernels of it in the sea bring forth more islands, he says. And while he is carrying that island in his pocket, he will drop some seeds of that island in the sea, creating more islands. And Gonzalo is tired of listening to their ridicule, and he says, aye, why not in good times, says Antonio. They don't give up. Whoever feels bad is their business, but Antonio and Sebastian do not give up ridiculing. So Gonzalo tries his best to change the topic. He goes to the original topic of garments not being soiled by the seawater. Sir, we were talking that our garments seem now as fresh as when we were at Tunis at the marriage of your daughter, who is now queen. Okay. He says, sir, we were talking about our garments being as fresh as when they were worn at the wedding. And he says, the rarest that ever came there. Rarest means that they're talking about the daughter being the rarest queen that ever came to Carthage. And Sebastian continues the original theme. He says, bait, I beseech you, widow Dido. And don't mention, please, widow Dido. Antonio, oh, widow Dido, aye, widow Dido, he says. They are still pulling Gonzalo's legs. And Gonzalo, is not, sir, my doublet as fresh as the first day I wore it? I mean, in a sort. Gonzalo keeps coming back to his topic of garments being fresh. Antonio, that sort was well fished for. Oh, he says, that sort, I like that way he used that sort. It was not as fresh, but sort of fresh. When I wore it at your daughter's marriage, Gonzalo keeps going back to this original theme. But Antonio and Sebastian are trapping him with his own words. Finally, Alonso speaks. He says, you cram these words into mine ears against the stomach of my sense. Would I had never married my daughter there. He says, you keep pushing these words into my ears that I don't have any desire to hear. If only I had never sent my daughter to Tunis to be married. For coming hence, my son is lost, and in my rate she too, who is so far from Italy removed, I never again shall see her. He says, I've not only lost my son, but daughter too. She has been given so far away in marriage. I don't think I will ever come to meet her again. In other words, this marriage has been a disaster for me, he says. O thou mine heir of Naples and of Milan, what strange fish hath made his meal on thee? He says, O my dear son, the heir of Naples and of Milan, what strange fish has eaten your body? Now Francisco comes and says, Sir, he may live. I saw him beat the surges under him and ride upon their back. He says, I have seen him swimming very hard. I have seen him defeating or beating those surges, those big waves. He trod the water whose enmity he flung aside and breasted the surge most swollen that met him. He says, he treaded water withstanding all their rage and fought through even the biggest waves that came to him. His bold head above the contentious waves he kept and oared himself with his good arm in lusty strokes to the shore. He bravely kept his head above the rough waves, and with his powerful arms in strong strokes he swam towards the sea, that over his wave-worn bases bowed, as stooping to relieve him. I not doubt he came alive to land. He says, when he swam so hard and tried so hard to come out of the sea, the land itself came to help him, as if it was reaching out to him. I have no doubt that he got to the shore alive. But Alonso can't believe it. He says, no, he's gone. But Sebastian, through his devious words, he says, Sir, you may thank yourself for this great loss, that would not bless our Europe with your daughter, but rather lose her to an African, where she at least is banished from your eye, who hath cause to wet the grief on it. He says, Sir, this is all your fault. You would not give your daughter in marriage to a European king or European prince, but rather you gave her to an African. At least she doesn't have to bear through this misery now. Okay, and then therefore you have done great injustice. Alonso says, Prithee, please. Prithee, peace, he says, no, please give me some peace. So to sum up, the conversation that takes place reveals us the personalities of the characters involved. Thank you.